When Maya Carter, a successful surgeon, boards her flight, she expects luxury, but instead, she's met with whispers, accusations, and one shocking twist that changes everything. The soft hum of engines fills the air as Maya Carter steps onto the plane, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Confident, poised, and dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, she commands attention. A sleek carry-on bag rolls behind her, and on her wrist, the delicate glint of her mother's bracelet, a symbol of love and resilience, catches the light. Maya moves through the first-class cabin with ease, her head held high. She has worked tirelessly to earn this moment of comfort, a reprieve before a pivotal corporate presentation overseas. As she places her laptop bag neatly under the seat, she smiles, savoring the small luxury of this rare downtime. The flight attendants bustle about with warm greetings, at least most of them. One, a blonde-haired woman with a tight smile and sharp eyes, seems less than welcoming. Maya notices her hesitation but brushes it off as pre-flight stress. As the plane fills, Maya feels a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The blonde attendant exchanges whispers with a man in a nearby seat, his expression cold and dismissive as he glances her way. Maya's instincts sharpen. Something feels off. When she catches the attendant's lips mutter her accompanied by a slight nod in Maya's direction, unease prickles at the back of her neck. The ordinary flight Maya expected now carries a tension she can't ignore. A tension that will soon explode into a confrontation no one on board will forget. Maya Carter adjusted the strap of her leather carry-on as she entered the first-class cabin, her presence commanding attention without effort. A world-renowned surgeon, she had spent years breaking barriers in a field dominated by voices that didn't look or sound like hers. Her accolades ranged from groundbreaking medical advancements to passionate advocacy for underserved communities. This flight was a rare moment of reprieve as she headed to Los Angeles for a prestigious charity gala, where she was the keynote speaker. Clinking softly on her wrist was a delicate bracelet her late mother had given her, a simple piece of jewelry with immeasurable sentimental value. It was a quiet reminder of the woman who had inspired her strength and resolve. Maya touched it briefly before settling into her seat, ready to review her notes for the speech she would deliver the next evening. The first-class cabin was a picture of opulence, wide leather seats, sparkling glasses of champagne, and the gentle hum of quiet luxury. Yet, despite the lavish surroundings, Maya couldn't shake the faint prickle of unease. Maya noticed the subtle glances as she placed her bag under her seat, furtive, fleeting looks that spoke louder than words. The atmosphere, while luxurious, carried an undercurrent of tension that was all too familiar. She had encountered it countless times before in spaces like these, where her presence was silently questioned by those who assumed she didn't belong. A flight attendant in a crisp uniform approached, her name tag reading Rebecca. Her smile was professional but tight, the kind of forced politeness that hinted at something simmering beneath the surface. "Good afternoon," Rebecca greeted. "May I see your ticket, please?" Maya raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unwavering. Without a word, she retrieved the ticket from her blazer pocket and handed it over. Rebecca studied it for a moment too long, her eyes narrowing slightly before she returned it. "Ah, I see," Rebecca said, her voice tinged with condescension. "Just wanted to make sure everything's in order. Sometimes passengers accidentally sit in the wrong section." Maya's lips curved into a polite but firm smile. "I assure you, everything's in order." Rebecca hesitated, her clipboard clutched tightly, before walking away. Maya could feel the tension hanging in the air like an unspoken accusation, her instincts telling her that this was far from over. Rebecca's presence lingered throughout the cabin, her actions subtle but deliberate. She bumped Maya's arm while passing with a tray, muttering a cursory "excuse me" that felt anything but genuine. Passengers nearby exchanged curious glances, but no one spoke up. The murmurs began not long after, whispers between Rebecca and another flight attendant as they cast glances in Maya's direction. Maya caught fragments. "Check" and "main cabin." Maybe she tightened her grip on the bracelet, her resolve hardening. Across the aisle, Jackson Reed, a prominent social media influencer with millions of followers, watched the scene unfold. Known for his charismatic persona and outspoken activism online, Jackson sat quietly, his phone in hand but his expression unreadable. Maya recognized him immediately, though she pretended not to. As Rebecca's behavior grew more blatant, Jackson's gaze lingered, his thumb hovering over his phone screen as if deciding whether to capture the moment. Rebecca approached again, this time with an air of forced professionalism. She began, there seems to be a discrepancy with your ticket. I'll need you to step to the back of the plane while we sort this out. Maya's eyes narrowed. There's no discrepancy, she said, her tone firm but controlled. This is the seat I paid for. The tension in the cabin thickened as passengers turned their attention to the escalating exchange. Jackson's hand stilled over his phone, his expression shifting as if weighing the consequences of speaking up or staying silent. The contrast between Maya's composed defiance and Rebecca's simmering hostility painted a vivid picture, setting the stage for a confrontation that was quickly building to a boiling point. Rebecca returned to Maya's row, clipboard in hand, her steps purposeful and her expression unreadable. The murmurs around the cabin quieted as passengers turned their attention to what was quickly becoming the most gripping event of the flight. Rebecca began, her tone firm but laced with barely concealed irritation. We've reviewed your ticket again, and there seems to be an issue. This seat isn't assigned to you. Maya looked up from her phone, her expression calm but her patience wearing thin. That's incorrect. I've already shown you my ticket, and it's clearly valid. If there's a problem, it's with your system, not me. Rebecca's smile tightened, her professionalism slipping into passive aggression. With all due respect, we can't have passengers occupying seats they haven't paid for. I'll need you to gather your things and move to the main cabin. Maya's voice remained steady, but her eyes flashed with defiance. I'm not moving. This is my seat. If there's an issue, I suggest you escalate it to someone who can actually resolve it. The cabin buzzed with whispered conversations as passengers leaned in to catch every word. Rebecca's demeanor grew colder. If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to involve security. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Before Maya could respond, Jackson Reed, the celebrity influencer sitting nearby, cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him as he casually removed his headphones and looked directly at Rebecca. Excuse me, Jackson said, his tone disarmingly polite, but I've been sitting here the entire time and I saw her ticket. It's valid. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding. Rebecca's jaw tightened as she turned to face him, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Mr. Reed, I assure you, this is a matter of protocol. We need to ensure all passengers are in their correct seats. Jackson raised an eyebrow, his easygoing demeanor suddenly sharper. Right, but it looks like she's already proven that. Why are you still pushing this? Rebecca's smile faltered as the cabin grew eerily silent. I appreciate your concern, but this doesn't involve you. Jackson leaned back in his seat, his gaze cool. You made it everyone's business the moment you turned this into a spectacle. Now it looks like you're targeting her. And that's not a good look for you or this airline. Rebecca's cheeks flushed, and she hesitated, her eyes darting to another passenger sitting a few rows ahead. The passenger, a man in his mid-50s with a tailored suit and an air of self-importance, cleared his throat loudly. Rebecca's just doing her job, he said, his voice carrying a tone of authority. If there's an issue with the ticket, it needs to be resolved. Maya's gaze snapped to the man, her instincts telling her this wasn't just a random intervention. The way Rebecca glanced at him, brief but deferential, spoke volumes. And who are you, Maya asked, her voice sharp but controlled. The man adjusted his tie, his expression smug. I'm a frequent flyer and someone who values the integrity of first-class accommodations. Rules exist for a reason. Jackson's easygoing demeanor hardened as he turned to the man. Let me guess, you and Rebecca know each other. Rebecca's head whipped around, her professional mask cracking for a split second. That's irrelevant, she said quickly. No, it's not, Maya interjected, her voice steady but icy. It's very relevant if you're colluding to single me out. The man smirked but said nothing, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Rebecca took a step closer to Maya's seat, her clipboard now a prop for intimidation. Ms. Carter, if you continue to refuse to comply, I will have no choice but to inform the captain and have you removed from this flight. Maya's eyes narrowed. Removed for what? Sitting in the seat I paid for? Go ahead, call the captain. Better yet, call security. Let's see how well your story holds up when the footage of this incident goes viral. Rebecca hesitated, clearly weighing her options. She glanced at Jackson, whose phone was now resting conspicuously on his tray table, its camera lens visible. "You're making this a bigger issue than it needs to be," Rebecca said, her voice low but venomous. "I'm trying to protect everyone's safety." Maya let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Safety? That's the excuse you're going with? This isn't about safety, and we both know it." Passengers around them began murmuring louder, some openly recording the exchange. The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence beginning to waver. Jackson finally broke the tension with a pointed question. "Rebecca, why don't you just admit what this is really about? It's not protocol. It's not safety. It's about you and your biases." Rebecca's face turned a deep shade of red. "That's a serious accusation," she snapped. "And so is accusing someone of fraud without proof," Maya shot back. "So what's it going to be?" Rebecca looked like she wanted to argue, but the weight of the passengers' collective gaze and the phones recording her every move seemed to paralyze her. She muttered something under her breath and stormed toward the galley, leaving the cabin buzzing with tension. As the passengers exchanged glances, Jackson leaned toward Maya, his voice low but firm. "This isn't over. You've got witnesses and I've got the footage. Whatever they try next, we'll handle it." Maya gave him a small, grateful nod, her resolve solidifying. She wasn't just fighting for her dignity anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been targeted and silenced. Maya sat upright, her eyes narrowing as she caught a glint of light reflecting off the phone in the suited man's hand. He wasn't just scrolling or texting, he was recording. Her pulse quickened as she pieced it together. This wasn't a coincidence. The man's earlier smugness, Rebecca's overconfidence, and now this. "Interesting," Maya murmured to herself, leaning slightly to get a better look. Jackson noticed her shift in posture. "What is it?" he whispered. Maya gestured subtly toward the man. "He's recording. And not for the right reasons." Jackson followed her gaze and frowned. "Unbelievable. You think this is for show? A stunt?" "More than that," Maya replied, her tone low and measured. "This feels calculated. They're not just trying to humiliate me, they're trying to gain something from it." Her suspicions were confirmed when she saw Rebecca glance toward the man. Their brief exchange of nods wasn't casual, it was coordinated. Maya clenched her fists, her mind racing. This wasn't just personal, it was exploitative. Instead of reacting, Maya exhaled slowly and straightened her posture. She looked directly at Rebecca, who was returning from the galley with a forced expression of calm. "Rebecca," Maya called out, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs in the cabin. "Before you say another word, you should know that I've been recording this entire interaction." The cabin fell silent. Rebecca froze mid-step, her eyes widening in alarm before narrowing into a glare. "Excuse me," Rebecca said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Maya raised her arm, revealing her smartwatch. "This little device has been recording audio since you first approached me. Every word you've said, every threat, every excuse, it's all here." Rebecca's mask of professionalism cracked. "You can't do that. That's a violation of what?" Maya interrupted, her tone sharp. "Your privacy? Your rights? That's ironic coming from someone who's been harassing me since I boarded." The suited man shifted uncomfortably, lowering his phone slightly. Maya caught the movement and turned her attention to him. "And you," she said, her voice firm but composed. "Recording me without my consent for what? To help Rebecca save face? To spin this into some kind of spectacle? Go ahead, tell us all why you're so invested in this." The man's face turned red, and he stammered, It's not like that." "Oh, I think it is," Jackson interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "People like you think you can bully someone and get away with it because no one will push back. Well, guess what? You picked the wrong person today." As the tension reached a boiling point, a voice broke through the silence. "She's right," said an older woman seated 2 rows behind Maya. Her voice was steady, but her expression carried a weight of quiet authority. "I've been watching since the beginning, and it's clear what's happening here. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's targeted harassment. Rebecca spun around to face the woman. "Ma am I." "Save it," the woman interrupted, holding up a hand. "I've seen enough. You've gone out of your way to single her out, and your excuses don't hold up. This isn't just unprofessional, it's disgraceful." Another passenger, a younger man across the aisle, chimed in. "She's not the only one who's noticed. We've all been watching, and it's obvious what's going on." The murmurs of agreement grew louder as more passengers nodded and voiced their support. Rebecca's composure began to unravel, her face a mixture of panic and indignation. The suited man, sensing the shift in the cabin's energy, quickly put his phone away and sank lower in his seat. Maya stood, her presence commanding the room. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "You're going to stop harassing me and anyone else who dares to sit in the seat they paid for. And when we land, I'll be forwarding this recording to my lawyer and the media. Let's see how your airline handles the fallout from that." Rebecca's lips trembled as she struggled to formulate a response. Before she could, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been informed of an incident in the first-class cabin. I assure you that we're addressing it, and I kindly ask for your patience as we do so." The timing couldn't have been worse for Rebecca. The passengers' murmurs grew louder, their frustration now directed not just at her but at the airline as a whole. Maya turned to Jackson, who gave her an approving nod. "You handled that like a pro," he whispered. "I'm done playing nice," Maya replied quietly. "It's time they faced the consequences." Rebecca retreated to the galley, her steps hurried and unsteady. The suited man avoided eye contact, his earlier bravado reduced to silence. Maya sat back down, her heart still racing but her resolve unshaken. Passengers around her offered words of encouragement and support, some even apologizing for not speaking up sooner. Maya nodded politely, grateful but focused on the bigger picture. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as the plane continued its journey, Maya prepared herself for the battle ahead. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for everyone who had ever been silenced. Rebecca's hands trembled as she clutched her clipboard, her mask of authority shattered. The murmurs from the first-class cabin turned into full-fledged chatter, passengers openly voicing their disdain. "This is unacceptable," said a sharply dressed woman in the aisle seat. "We're not going to ignore what just happened." Rebecca turned to respond, but her words faltered as the high-profile influencer stood up. Jackson, now visibly angered, raised his voice for the first time. "She's not alone in this," Jackson said, his deep, commanding voice carrying across the cabin. "I saw everything, and I'm backing her up." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Rebecca's panicked gaze darted between Maya and Jackson. The passenger's attention, now fully captured, made her unease palpable. "Sir, this is a misunderstanding," Rebecca stammered, trying to regain control. "No, it's not," Jackson cut her off. "And it won't be dismissed as one. People like you think you can get away with this because no one will call you out. Well, you picked the wrong day to try that." The cabin erupted into scattered applause, bolstering Maya's confidence. She gave Jackson a small nod, silently thanking him for his support. Rebecca stormed off toward the galley, only to return moments later with the captain and a younger flight attendant in tow. The captain's face was tight with forced neutrality, but the tension in his posture betrayed his frustration. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain began, his voice calm yet strained. "We understand there's been some confusion, and I'd like to address it personally." Maya stood, holding up her smartwatch. "Confusion? Let me play you the recording of your flight attendant harassing me for no reason other than the fact that I'm sitting in first class." Rebecca's face turned pale. "That's not what happened." "Enough," the captain said, raising a hand to silence her. He turned to Maya. I assure you this is not reflective of our airline's values." Maya's expression was calm but unyielding. "Spare me the scripted apology. You're only here because half the cabin saw what happened. If you actually cared, Rebecca wouldn't have been allowed to act like this in the first place." The younger flight attendant stepped forward, her voice shaky. I I saw it too, she said, avoiding Rebecca's glare. She was out of line. The passengers murmured louder, and the captain's composure slipped. He shot Rebecca a warning look, then addressed the cabin. We'll be conducting a full review of this incident once we land. Just as the captain tried to defuse the situation, Jackson cleared his throat. I wasn't planning to say anything, he began, his voice tinged with emotion. But this isn't the first time I've experienced something like this with your airline. The passengers turned their attention to him, their curiosity piqued. I've been treated differently, subtly of course, on more than one occasion, Jackson continued, his gaze locking onto the captain. But I let it slide because I thought calling it out wouldn't make a difference. Seeing what's happening to Maya now, I realized that silence only enables people like Rebecca. Maya's eyes widened slightly, her respect for Jackson deepening. I have a platform, Jackson added, his voice firm. And I'm going to use it. This stops today. Rebecca's composure shattered completely. You can't accuse me of. I'm not accusing you, Jackson interrupted. I'm exposing you. As if on cue, Jackson pulled out his phone and opened a live streaming app. To everyone watching, he began, aiming the camera at himself. This is what discrimination looks like at 30,000 feet. The passengers gasped as the realization of Jackson's influence dawned on them. Within seconds, the live stream began to flood with comments. Rebecca lunged forward. You can't film me without my consent, she snapped. Jackson turned the camera toward her, his expression calm but unyielding. I think the public will want to see this. Go ahead, Rebecca, tell them why you thought Maya didn't belong in first class. Rebecca froze, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. The younger flight attendant stepped back, clearly unwilling to be associated with her. As the live stream gained traction, passengers began pulling out their own phones, capturing every moment. Maya, seeing the tide turning, spoke up. This isn't just about me, she said, addressing both the camera and the passengers. This is about every person who's been treated unfairly because of prejudice. We have to hold people accountable for their actions. The applause was louder this time, resonating throughout the cabin. Rebecca's shoulders slumped, and the captain's expression darkened. We'll be landing shortly, he said, his tone clipped. This matter will be handled appropriately once we're on the ground. By the time the plane touched down, Jackson's live stream had gone viral. News outlets were already picking up the story, and hashtags like FlightWhaleBlack and Accountability Now were trending. As the passengers disembarked, reporters swarmed the gate, their cameras aimed at Maya, Jackson, and Rebecca. The airline's PR team scrambled to contain the damage, but it was clear the story had already spiraled out of their control. Maya walked confidently through the crowd, her head held high. She knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, but for the first time, she felt the full weight of the support behind her. Rebecca, on the other hand, slipped away unnoticed, her career and reputation in tatters. As the plane landed and taxied to the gate, the tension from the confrontation lingered in the air. Maya sat upright in her seat, resolute and composed, though her mind was racing. When the doors opened, a member of the airline's PR team approached her, their demeanor overly polite yet hollow. They offered a scripted apology, attempting to smooth things over with vague promises of addressing the matter. Maya, however, was not interested in empty words. She made it clear that this wasn't about her alone, it was about a system that needed to change, and she wouldn't settle for anything less than accountability. Her firm stance caused murmurs among the disembarking passengers, many of whom lingered to listen or record the exchange. When Maya exited the gate, Jackson, the high-profile influencer who had stood by her, caught up. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications as his live stream continued to gain traction. He commended Maya for her composure and offered her a way to amplify her story, suggesting connections with media outlets and advocacy organizations. Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure if she wanted the public attention, but the outpouring of support she had witnessed during the flight solidified her resolve. She agreed, knowing this was an opportunity to push for real change. As they walked into the arrivals hall, they were greeted by reporters and cameras. Before Maya could speak, other passengers stepped forward to share their accounts. An older woman who had defended Maya earlier described the flight attendant's behavior, calling it unacceptable. Another passenger showed a video he had taken, posting it online in real time to ensure the story reached a wider audience. Their support fueled Maya's determination. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It had become a collective stand against prejudice. By the time Maya reached her home, her phone was buzzing nonstop with messages of support and media requests. Social media was flooded with videos and first-hand accounts from the passengers. Hashtags like Justice for Maya and End Airline Bias were trending across platforms, making it clear this incident had struck a nerve. Meanwhile, the airline released a carefully worded statement, pledging to investigate and ensure fair treatment for all passengers. Maya read it with skepticism, knowing it was an attempt at damage control rather than meaningful change. In the days that followed, Maya's story continued to spread, bolstered by Jackson's platform and the viral nature of the footage. Advocacy groups reached out to offer support, while former airline employees began to come forward with their own stories of discrimination and neglect. The pressure on the airline mounted, forcing them to announce new policies, including mandatory bias training and independent oversight of discrimination complaints. However, Maya knew these changes were just the beginning. Months later, Maya found herself boarding another flight, this time to speak at a national conference on workplace equality. As she took her seat, a flight attendant approached her, not with hostility, but with genuine warmth. The attendant thanked her for the courage she displayed and the change she had inspired. Maya smiled, clutching the bracelet on her wrist, a symbol of resilience and hope. As the plane ascended, she gazed out the window, her mind already focused on the work ahead. This was not the end of her journey. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. As Maya settled into her seat on a new flight, this time bound for the charity event she had been preparing for, the weight of the recent events lingered in her mind. She adjusted the bracelet on her wrist, her fingers brushing against the cool metal, a cherished gift from her late mother. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her to always stand firm in the face of adversity. The hum of the engines was steady, but her thoughts raced with everything that had happened. She felt a mix of pride and resolve, knowing that the confrontation she endured had sparked conversations far beyond the confines of that airplane cabin. As the plane ascended, Maya gazed out at the horizon, the sunlight filtering through the clouds. She thought of the messages of support she had received, the stories others shared, and the courage it took for so many to speak up. Her journey wasn't just about her anymore. It was part of a collective fight for dignity and justice. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. It's a reminder that standing up to injustice, no matter how daunting, can inspire change far beyond what we see. Share this story. Speak out when you witness wrongs. Your voice matters, and together we can demand accountability and create a world where dignity and respect are non-negotiable.